Emily Carter had always believed in partnership, loyalty, and trust. For 25 years, she had been the perfect wife. The kind of woman who stood by her husband through thick and thin. She had given up her career to raise their children, manage the household, and support David as he climbed the corporate ladder. Their marriage, from the outside, seemed flawless, a well-balanced life built on mutual respect and shared sacrifices. David had always reassured her that they were a team. He handled the finances, making sure they were secure for the future, while Emily took care of everything else. She never questioned it. After all, why would she? David had never given her a reason to doubt him. But something had changed. Lately, he had become more secretive, closing his laptop quickly whenever she entered the room, taking calls in hushed tones, and getting defensive when she asked about their savings. Emily chalked it up to work stress. Maybe there was a difficult project. Or maybe he was worried about retirement. She wanted to believe that. She needed to believe that. Then, one evening, the first crack in the illusion appeared. David had left his laptop open on the kitchen counter while he took a shower. It wasn't like Emily to snoop. She respected his privacy, but when she walked by, an email notification caught her eye. It was from a bank she didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Your recent transfer has been completed." Curiosity gnawed at her. Emily hesitated, but then her hands moved on their own, clicking the message open. What she saw made her stomach drop. An account she had never heard of. A balance of over $500,000. And the most gut-wrenching part? Her name wasn't anywhere on it. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the screen, her pulse pounding in her ears. The account balance blinked back at her. $500. A staggering amount of money. But it wasn't the number that made her hands tremble. It was the betrayal. David had always told her they were comfortable, but not extravagant. He had insisted that they needed to be cautious with spending, that their savings were just enough for retirement and that they couldn't afford to splurge on unnecessary things. Emily had accepted it. She had sacrificed her own wants, never questioning why David always seemed to have the final say over their finances. But now, here it was, a hidden bank account, with more money than she had ever seen in their shared statements. Her mind raced. How long had he been hiding this? How much of their tight budget had been a carefully crafted lie? Emily needed answers. Her fingers shook as she clicked through the account history. Transactions stretched back for years, steady deposits, large transfers, all made without her knowledge. Some amounts were small, others were substantial, but they all had one thing in common. They were kept away from her. Then, something even worse, she recognized some of the withdrawals. A private gym membership, luxury hotel stays, a payment labeled Fleur Boutique, an expensive designer store Emily had never shopped at. She swallowed hard. If this wasn't for their future, then who was it for? Emily's world tilted. Had he been preparing for a life without her? Had he been spending on someone else while telling her they couldn't afford vacations? A sickening thought crept into her mind. Had she been living in a marriage that was already over? Her hands balled into fists. No, she wasn't going to sit back and cry. She was going to find out the truth. And when she did, David would regret ever thinking she wouldn't. Emily refused to let emotions cloud her judgment. This wasn't just about betrayal, it was about control. David had spent years managing their finances alone, making sure she stayed financially dependent on him, feeding her the same old story that they needed to be careful with money. And all along, he had been hoarding wealth for himself. She wasn't going to let him win. The first thing she did was copy everything. Screenshots of bank statements, transaction histories, emails, anything that proved David had been hiding money. She sent them to a secure folder and printed hard copies, tucking them away in a safe place. If this was going to get messy, she needed to be prepared. Next, she made an appointment with a top-tier divorce attorney, a woman who specialized in high-asset cases, particularly those involving hidden financial misconduct. When Emily laid out her evidence, the lawyer's eyes narrowed with interest. "This is classic financial infidelity," she said. "He's been stashing money away, likely to avoid sharing it in case of a divorce. But legally, he's in trouble. Emily listened carefully as the lawyer outlined the plan. Because David had hidden marital assets, she was entitled to half, or more. And if she could prove he had been using that money to fund something else, another woman, perhaps it could strengthen her position even further. Emily left that office not as a heartbroken wife, but as a woman on a mission. She wasn't going to scream or cry. She wasn't going to confront him outright. No, she was going to let him think he had won. That night, she cooked dinner like usual, sat across from him, and smiled as he talked about being careful with their budget. He had no idea what was coming. While he slept soundly, confident that his little scheme would never be uncovered, Emily was strategizing every move. And when she struck, David wouldn't even see it coming. Emily had spent weeks preparing for this moment. And now, everything was in place. David had no idea that his carefully built illusion was about to shatter. She chose the perfect setting, a quiet dinner at their favorite upscale restaurant. The one they used to go to for anniversaries. She made sure he was comfortable, relaxed, completely unaware. The waiter poured them wine. And David, ever the confident man, smirked as he swirled his glass. I know you've been worried about money lately, but don't stress. I've got it all under control. Emily smiled. Oh, I know you do. In fact, I wanted to talk about that. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick manila folder. Setting it on the table between them, David's smirk faltered. What's this? He asked. His voice too casual. Emily leaned in, her voice calm but sharp as a knife. This is everything. Bank statements, transaction records, the account you never thought I'd find. $500,000. David, money you've been hiding while telling me we couldn't afford a vacation. David froze, his fingers clenched around his fork. For the first time in years, he was speechless. Emily, she held up a hand. No, you don't get to lie your way out of this. I know what you've been doing. I know about the private transactions, the expensive gifts, the withdrawals to a boutique I've never shopped at. David's face drained of color. His mouth opened, then shut again. He had no excuse, no way out. Emily leaned back, taking a slow sip of her wine. I've already spoken to a lawyer. Because you hid marital assets, I'm entitled to more than just half in the divorce settlement. And since I have proof you used that money for personal expenses, you might be looking at some serious consequences. David lost it, his face twisted in frustration. You think you're going to take my money? You wouldn't even have a life without me. Emily, she laughed. A real, genuine laugh. Your money? She repeated. You mean the money I sacrificed my career for? The money you built while I took care of everything else so you could focus on work? Let me be very clear. David, without me, you wouldn't have half of what you do. And soon? She smiled. You won't have any of it. David sat back, breathing heavily, for the first time ever. He looked like a man who had just realized he had lost. And Emily? She had never felt more powerful. David had always believed he was the smarter one, the one in control, the one who could manipulate the truth, twist the numbers, and keep Emily exactly where he wanted her, dependent, unaware, powerless. But he had been wrong. The divorce moved faster than he expected. Thanks to Emily's ironclad evidence, the court ruled that he had intentionally hidden marital assets, which meant she was entitled to far more than just half. 65%. That's how much Emily walked away with. Not only did she get the house, but she also secured a significant share of his investments and retirement funds. And that secret account he had been hiding so carefully? Legally split down the middle. David had fought, screamed, tried to negotiate, but the law was not on his side. In the end, he lost everything he had schemed to protect. And Emily? She moved forward. She sold the house, not because she had to, but because she wanted a fresh start. She bought a smaller place in a town by the coast, where she could wake up to the sound of waves instead of empty lies. One day, months after the divorce was finalized, her phone buzzed with a message from David. Emily, let's talk. We don't have to end things this way. Maybe we can. She deleted it before finishing the sentence. David had spent years taking from her, but now, she owed him nothing, and that, Emily realized, was the greatest victory of all. Emily didn't just win the divorce, she reclaimed her life. For years, she had lived in David's shadow, believing that her sacrifices were just part of being a good wife. But now, for the first time in decades, she was free. She took her share of the settlement and invested in herself, something David had never let her do. She enrolled in business courses, something she had always dreamed of but had put off to support his career. She reconnected with old friends, the ones David had subtly pushed out of her life over the years. She even started traveling, booking the trips he always said they couldn't afford, even though he had been hoarding money the entire time. Meanwhile, David's life fell apart. He had assumed he could bounce back, rebuild, and find another woman to take care of him. But his reputation was ruined. Word had spread about what he had done, and potential business partners were hesitant to trust him. His secret wealth had vanished overnight, and with it, the luxury lifestyle he had taken for granted. The final blow came when his mistress, who had once enjoyed the perks of his hidden bank account, suddenly lost interest. Without money to throw around, David was just another aging man with nothing left to offer. One evening, as Emily sat on her balcony, watching the sunset with a glass of wine in hand, her phone buzzed again. Another message from David. "Emily, I made a mistake. I was wrong. Can we talk?" She stared at the screen, then smiled to herself. Once upon a time, she might have answered. She might have wanted closure, validation, an apology that actually meant something. But not anymore. Emily didn't need his regret, his excuses, or his empty words. She simply deleted the message, leaned back in her chair, and took a slow, satisfied sip of wine. She had already won. Emily's new life was nothing like the one she had left behind, and that was exactly how she wanted it. For the first time in decades, she was living on her own terms. She had moved to a charming coastal town, where the air was crisp, the people were friendly, and her past no longer had a hold on her. She bought a beautiful cottage with ocean views, decorated exactly the way she liked, without anyone rolling their eyes at her choices. Every morning, she woke up not to the stress of managing someone else's life, but to the sound of waves crashing against the shore. She spent her days however she pleased, some mornings at a local cafe, reading the books she never had time for, other days learning new skills that David had once dismissed as unnecessary. She had gone back to school, taking business and finance courses online. It had started as a way to regain control over her own finances. But soon, it turned into something more. Emily discovered she had a natural talent for financial planning, the very thing David had tried to keep her out of. Then, one day, an idea struck her. She wasn't the only woman who had been kept in the dark about money, made to feel small and dependent. So, she did something bold. She started her own financial coaching business, specifically for women going through divorce. She built it from the ground up, helping women like her reclaim their independence, showing them how to protect their assets, invest wisely, and never end up at the mercy of a manipulative spouse again. Word spread quickly, and before she knew it, Emily had clients from all over the country. Women who had been lied to, tricked, or left with nothing came to her for guidance, and she helped them rebuild, just like she had rebuilt herself. And the best part? She was doing it without anyone telling her she wasn't capable. One afternoon, as she sat on her sun-drenched porch, answering emails from clients, she thought about how far she had come. The woman who once believed she had no choice but to sacrifice herself for her husband. She was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and completely unstoppable. Emily didn't just survive the betrayal. She turned it into the best thing that had ever happened to her. This story is about betrayal, resilience, and ultimate justice. Emily dedicated her life to a marriage she thought was built on trust, only to discover that her husband had been secretly hoarding money while keeping her financially dependent. But instead of breaking down, she fought back, exposed his lies, and walked away stronger than ever. In the end, David lost everything, while Emily not only rebuilt her life but thrived in ways she never imagined. What do you think? Did David deserve what happened to him? Comment 2 if you think karma was fair, or 7 if you think Emily should have handled it differently. And if you love stories about justice, betrayal, and empowerment, hit like and subscribe for more powerful Reddit stories. Let's talk in the comments.